so good afternoon. I'd like, before I start with the lecture itself, there are two comments that I'd like to make. It's not going to be a historical lecture, contrary to what Dennis said. It's going to be a lecture about how the Islamic Republic sees history. And this is my first comment as an historian, but especially as someone who is aware of the way they think in Iran with regards to the past and collective consciousness. History is important. There's no doubt about it. And the collective consciousness is also important. I was once told by an American journalist his girlfriend is Italian, and she visited Iran, and she went into the taxi, and the taxi driver in Iran, like in Israel, starts speaking with her immediately, and he asks her, "Where are you from?" And she said, "I'm from Rome." And then he told her, "Oh, you're from Rome. So we and you have something in common. Both of us were empires." And after that, it's important to say, eventually, when the Iranian leaderships make decision, also with regards to their policy towards Russia, the past is important, but the present is more important. So it's important to say that. So the second comment relates to the fact that we live in a world which is affected by interests. And Dennis and Arkady talked about realpolitics and interests. Interests are important. But I think that when we talk about Iran and the way mainly the conservative administration in Iran led by Khamenei refers to Russia, interests are important, but it's also anchored in a worldview. Professor Litvak mentioned the slogan that they used right after the revolution: not West, not East, only Islamic Republic. Or as Khomeini once said, the USSR is worse than US, and US is worse than USSR. So this thing has changed. It has changed. And in recent years, and let me say it very, very clearly, especially after the decision made by Trump to quit the agreement, nuclear agreement, the argument in Iran between the pragmatic party that says we should be very cautious about developing total independence on the Russians, and the conservative party, this argument was resolved. So that's why I agree with Arkady Pazishkian. He might speak in a different language, but Pezeshkian during the election campaign talked about increasing ties with the European, but his first phone call was to Putin. And if you want to understand a little bit better about their view, Khamenei's views, let's go back to a conference that was held in May 2023 in Iran, and the title was the International Conference on New World Order Geometry. That was the title of the convention. And if you listen to the speeches, you could understand exactly what Khamenei's message is. The world is changing. There is a new world order, and this world order is characterized by decline in the power of the US and the creation of a new world order with Chinese and Russian dominance, and we should be in the right part of history. And the right part of history, it's not what we think is the right part, and not what US sees as the right part, but what Iran sees as the right side of history. And maybe Professor Menashe will talk about it. So the Islamic Revolution not only relates to Islam, it's also about struggle with imperialism and collaboration with the Third World or the global South against American dominance. And after these two comments, I'd like to talk about the subject, and I will also adhere to this text because On February 10th, 2022, the Russian embassy in Tehran wrote in its Twitter account that there will be a ceremony held in memory of Alexander Griboyov, who was killed when the masses took over the embassy. In this tweet, you could see the Russian ambassador in Tehran placing a bouquet in memory of Griboyov. This massacre in Russian embassy in Tehran took place after Griboyov actually allowed an Armenian to stay in the embassy as he escaped from the palace, and two Georgian women who became Muslim and were married to a senior official, and he actually gave them asylum. And there was an agreement between Iran and Russia, which ended the second war between the countries. Griboyov, who was the Russian ambassador in Iran, played a major role in the negotiation that led to the signing of the contract, and he refused the Shah request to give away the refugees. And there was also actually a ruling by a clergyman, and then masses of Iranians engulfed the embassy. And even after Griboyov agreed to give these three people away, the masses broke into the embassy, massacred 37 employees of the embassy, and only the secretary managed to escape. And Griboyov was beheaded, and his body was thrown away. The tweet actually was criticized by many Iranians in an editorial published in a newspaper. The correspondent wrote that signing of this contract is one historical event that is still a concern, and he claims that Iran is an independent state capable of negotiating with foreign superpowers as an equal. But this picture that was published by the Russian embassy is a testimony for the fact that Russia continues to see Iran as they did in the past. They wanted to cherish this person who humiliated Iran, and just a reminder of Iranians' defeat. And this ambassador should not remind the citizens of Iran about their defeat. There was also another criticism about the Russian ambassador, and they wrote that for the first time, and a Russian ambassador actually talks about this past ambassador, and the criticism was also expressed by the Iranian parliament that claimed, and representative that claimed that the Russian ambassador represents humiliation. So that was not the first time that the Russian embassy in Iran was criticized. In 2021, the ambassador was summoned after a Twitter account showed a picture where Russian ambassador and British ambassador were seen in a way, sitting in a way the past leaders, European leaders, sat at the summit in 1943. Many people in Iran said that they were trying to remind Iran the time when there was occupation in Iran. The harsh criticism towards the Russian embassy tweets is just a testimony of the suspicion, the relationship between Russia and Iran. I don't have enough time to discuss all the ups and downs, but there have been so many ups and downs. In 19th century, Russia stole territories from Iran, and there were times when Russian soldiers invaded Iran. At the time of the Shah, Russia was perceived as a significant threat, and they were afraid of expansion of communism. So there was also left movements and ethnic minorities in Iran, and the invasion of USSR to and the aid were other sources of the tension in their relationship between the two countries. You can find maybe one of the clearest example of this suspicion. So there have been this contract, the Turkmenchai contract was quoted so many times. I'll give you some examples just to show you how come even today this old contract still is used in the political struggle within Iran. This contract was etched in Iranian history as a symbol of defeat, loss of territorial sovereignty, and loss of territories. So this contract enforced Iran to give up on territories and rights, acknowledgement of the rights of Russian traders, and great compensation to Russia because of war costs. Khamenei started mentioning this contract in order to compare it between Iran and Islamic Republic. When he referred to this contract, he wanted to use this collective memory to contrast the failures of Iran before the revolution and the success of the Republic, the Islamic Republic. In a speech in 1962, Khamenei compared the situation of Iran in the past to its situation during Iran-Iraq war. Khamenei emphasized that Iran back then remained the same country and the Iranians are the same people, but in those days the nation did not succeed and this historical defeat went on for 150 years. Khamenei repeated the comparison in a speech in September 2000 in front of cultural activists, and he mentioned that 200 years have passed ever since this contract, but still every Iranians feel ashamed and humiliated and defeated and ask themselves how come the leaders of the state allowed the enemy to reach the core of the country and took over 17 cities in Caucasians. So the contract was so significant. So ever since the second decade of the 21st century, they started using it when they had like political struggles. It was expressed during the talks on nuclear program ever since 2003. The references to this contract appear in the initial parts of diplomatic negotiations. Hussein Mousavian, who was the head of the foreign policy in Iran and a member of the nuclear negotiation team, mentioned in his memoir that in 2003 El-Baghdadi visited Tehran and presented to officials in Tehran a request to get the additional protocol of NPT that allows the agency to use strict steps. And following days after the visit, Mousavian met with his consultant, Violetti, and updated him that Iran will not accept the additional protocol because it's too similar to the contract. And then Akbar Rashami attacked the decision of the Governor's Committee of the Atomic Energy Agency to transfer the Iranian case. So in a sermon in the University of Tehran, he compared the efforts to convince Iran to let go of its achievements, and he mentioned that this is the right of Iran, and if the Iranian leaders let go of this or make do without these achievements, it will be very similar to the contract, and nobody will forgive them for doing that. So the nuclear talks managed by Rouhani administration between 2013 and 2015 brought about political criticism towards the president. The opponents of the president blamed him for weak policy that led to agreement, as part of which Iran accepted different concessions, and Hussein Tallah condemned the way the government negotiated and said that the nuclear agreement is an expression of Qajari thought that enforced upon Iran past agreements. So Husseinian, also a radical member of Madres, objected to the agreement and said that it will be written in history as the second Turkmenistan contract. Another expression of it you can see in the reaction to the strategic partnership agreement between Iran and China. That will be the topic of the next part of our lecture. In 2021, the foreign ministers of China and Iran signed a 25-year-long agreement, and the opponents claim that Beijing is taking advantage of Iran and emphasized the asymmetrical relationship between the two countries. In a letter sent to Chinese president, Iranians protested against the agreement and said that it has no human moral validity. They compared this agreement to the contract and requested the Chinese to avoid signing the contract. In social media, Iranians also expressed their objection to this contract and called it the Chinese Turkmenistan agreement. Using this contract became so dominant, so they started using it for other purposes. It was recruited by critics that wanted to avoid providing vaccination. So actually, Iranians bought vaccination from China, and in July, the CEO of the Ministry of Health talked about the possibility that Iran will purchase Russian vaccination, and he said that they cannot expect Iran to allow a different country to hold a clinical trial in Iran as if it was just a colony, like there was in the time of Turkmenistan contract. The critical approach towards the Russian invasion into Ukraine reflects Iranian suspicions towards Russia. This is how the deputy chair of Majlis, you can see in the picture all the protesters in front of the embassy following the invasion to Ukraine. So the deputy chair of Majlis, Ali Mutahari, who is a conservative, pragmatic conservative and supported Rouhani, he said that Iran must condemn Russian invasion into Ukraine. In a tweet, he claimed that the incidents he claimed that they need to change the way Iranian media cover Russian invasion, and that they need to remember Armenia and Azerbaijan as part of the Turkmenistan contract and the support of USSR in Saddam Hussein's Iraq. And Islami, whom I mentioned earlier, also warned against the expansion aspiration of Putin, and he said that Russian attack on Ukraine should remind Iran about Russians' behavior throughout 200 years, where it harmed Iran and acted in contrary to its interests. So also the policy of Russia with regards to UAE was also an opportunity for the opponents to express their reservations following a joint declaration of Russia and UAE. When Russians supported UAE, a TV channel reminded the viewers that history proved time and time again that Russia cannot be trusted and it's still hostile towards Iran. In a different article, it says that Iran should balance between West and East to improve its maneuvering capabilities. And for football fans, they also mentioned that the political world is similar to a football match, and if all the players are on one side of the field, they won't be able to win. So there is great doubt in my eyes whether these voices will change the Iranian strategy towards Russia in the foreseeable future. They still see developments for a bipolar new order, not led by the Americans, and where the Iran can have a more significant role. But historical hostility towards Russia and disappointment with Russia, for example, because of the delays in the provision and aircraft and the feeling that Russia does not meet the expectations of Iran, they pose a question mark with regards to the official policy vis-a-vis Iran, and it might be an opportunity to make these rival countries even more